Welcome to Creekside Chats with successful multifamily real estate investors. Dr. Allen chats with successful investors exploring their journey from setback to triumph. Through this window, we glimpse the truths that inspire our guests to invest abundantly and flourish in all areas of life. And now your host, Dr. Allen.
Hello and welcome to Creekside Chats with successful multifamily real estate investors, where we delve deep into the lives of our successful guests to find inspiration for our own growth and development. I'm your host, Dr. Allen. With Boardwalk Wealth Group, today's guest is responsible for capital raising, strategic planning, and investor relations. He has over 10 years of global investment experience and has participated in capital financing in mergers and acquisitions valued at $3.7 billion. He holds the distinction of Chartered Financial Analyst from the CFA Institute and graduated with honors from the University of Toronto with a Bachelor's in Commerce and Finance. He moved from Canada and now lives in Texas with his wife and his newborn son and his 2-year-old son. Welcome, Omar Khan.
Thank you. How are you, Alan?
I'm good. Doing well, thank you. So glad to have you here today.
I'm very appreciative. We've rescheduled this because my son was born a few weeks ago, so I'm appreciative of you being flexible.
Well, I was glad to do that, and glad to know that everything turned out okay with the birth, and I hope that you and your wife are doing well and recovering from that.
Yeah, and now it's just the next 18 years I got to figure out.
Yes, indeed. Well, you've got time for that. Today, well, let's start with, why don't I just ask you the question of, what did you dream about becoming when you were a child?
Definitely not in real estate. I can tell you that.
I would think most people don't dream of becoming realtors.
You'd have to be like completely psychotic to be dreaming about real estate as a kid. Look, I've, the usual sports star, fireman, rock star. I was really into music.
Really?
So, so that sort of stuff, obviously. Any cool thing, actor, you don't really understand what these things really mean, kid, right? But, all the cool little things. I never thought most of my day would be one massive phone call. I thought I'd be doing way cooler stuff, like being in space, or jumping out of a plane, or, fighting a fire, or being in front of 50,000 people,
Yes, indeed. So what brought you down to earth and finally led you into, finance, first of all, and then into real estate from that?
Well, I grew up, for one. And secondly, I had minimal talents also in the creative field. So, if you're not, I don't know, Jimmy Page level-esque guitarist, it's going to be pretty hard to get a world-famous band going. It's just not going to happen, right? And I realized that pretty early. So I think one of the big things I did realize was how to cut my losses pretty early.
Okay.
The other thing is my family's a business family. They're fairly financially sophisticated. So whereas my parents were very encouraging for me to do pretty much anything, which I tell now people is not the smart thing to do. Don't just say do everything. Give them a few options and just go on that. In my particular case, I kind of went for like something more reliable, something that was always going to be, give me a job and all that sort of stuff. But I think it was also because of my family's entrepreneurial background, which just provided me a lot of tools growing up to maybe see finance the more viable career option than other career options.
Yeah, well, that is interesting. I had to come to the same conclusions as well, because I wanted to be a pianist when I grew up, and so, but that takes
requires
real.
You got to give your mortgage, your soul, basically. Or something.
Yes, exactly, and you have to have a real skill set for that and a real talent for it to be successful in that field. Well, tell us, what was one of the most memorable times in your childhood, and did that tend to be a formative experience?
Well, I don't know if it was formative or not, but I'm very grateful and lucky to have had an exceptional childhood. Now that I have kids, I sometimes think, wow, it's like maybe I don't even think I could provide them that level of childhood that I was lucky enough to have. Yeah. But, small little things, nothing was formative. There's lots of small things that were formative. But to give you an example, my grandfather from, my mother's father, I loved bananas growing up as a kid. I could spend like my entire afternoon having bananas. So every time he'd come visit me, he'd bring a little banana tree.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a little small one, right? And these are like the smaller designer bananas. They're not like the big bananas, right?
You don't grow those in Canada.
No. I was living in Pakistan at that time. But
okay.
But the thing was that it was just thoughtful, right? It was just nice of him. And I would spend like whatever, I don't know, the whole afternoon eating bananas because I love bananas still.
Yeah.
Or for instance, he was a voracious reader. So in the basement of his house, he had a massive library. And, I could go down with him when I visited his house and spend hours on end, maybe days on end, just in that library, just reading random books. And what I also liked about him, which is something that I try to do as well, is that I'm not one of those people who only reads like one thing. People say, what's your favorite real estate book or this? I'm not one of those people. I read whatever. I just enjoy the aspect of reading. So I'll read everything from a tabloid to something really, really, really serious white paper on something. And which is what he did as well, right? He was a lawyer. He's a very well-accomplished lawyer and a high court judge as well. So which is what I liked. So I could open his library and read about the Guinness Book of World Records, some trashy novel, some really serious stuff on law, and that I think were really nice experiences.
Yeah, good. Well, neat. So it is. It's easy to talk about our successes, but it's not so easy to talk about our setbacks and bumps in the roads. But those are, I think, some of the most inspiring things about us. So can you think of a time in your life that was a particular setback that actually may have been felt really devastating at the time, but in hindsight, it actually turned out to be perhaps a fork in the road that was the best thing that could have happened to you?
I mean, look, on a professional basis, there have been many, but on a personal basis, when my grandmother died, she died of cancer. So the last few years we were with her. It was painful for her because just going through that process, but otherwise she was in very high spirits. So personally, she died. That was obviously personally very devastating for me. But on the flip side to that, on a personal basis, it did force me to become a lot more focused in life, right? Because I was, 17, 18, maybe 20 years old. It allowed me to understand. I mean, we all understand we've got to pass away and all that stuff, but it allowed me to be a lot more focused, to realize, look, regardless of how long we live, we still only have a very short period of time. And you've got to, you got to try to make the best of what you have, right? And there's no use complaining. Just go with the flow, right? So but it still took me a few years to translate that into a professional sort of career success or whatever you'd like to call it. But having that realization really helped me go forward in life.
Yeah, oftentimes things like that do take a while to materialize. I mean, I can look back upon one of the most devastating experiences in my life, and it actually took some. The moment was very devastating, but it really took about 5 years to really pull it all together. But it was that one particular moment in time that actually.
Well, yeah, look, in my particular case, just to let you know, I mean, I knew my grandmother had died, and maybe it's just I'm a guy. But I remember distinctly 1 or 2 or maybe 3 years after that, I was taking a shower. And I don't know what I thought. I was like, yeah, I'm going to go tell it to my grandmother. And that's when I actually realized, oh, she's actually passed away. I can't actually go back and, it's going to be like, hey, what's up?
You can't go talk to her.
Yeah. So I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah. But the spirit was still there.
Yeah. But I'm very grateful for the experiences I had. Yeah. I mean, lots of kids don't have those experiences.
Right. This is true. Yeah. So if you are different now, today than you were, say, 10, 20 years ago, how are you different psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually? And what do you attribute to those changes?
Well, I don't know if emotionally guys ever grow up, so I don't know about that. But psychologically, I mean, look, on the whole, I'd say I'd like to think I've improved somewhat. Maybe not by as much as I thought I would, but somewhat in the sense that I'm more focused. In my 20s, I worked hard, extremely hard, but that was just the nature of working in investment banking, finance. You work hard, but you play hard as well. And in my particular case, I've realized as I've grown older, I'm more focused on the tasks at hand, but I've also designed, or rather I'm on the way, it's not happened yet. I'm on the way to designing a life where I will have more time freedom and I don't have to go do things that I have to do. Well, again, I'm not perfect. We still have to do a lot of things we don't want to do. But slowly I feel I'm inching towards an ideal, which I always had in my mind. Like, I don't want to do things for the sake of doing things. I want to do things because, I want to do them. Or I'm not going to do it. So that, I think, has been the real shift. And the other shift is just, with the passage of time, hopefully you become more mature. You realize what you like, what you don't like, what your boundaries are, what boundaries you can extend. But those were only possible with experiences, professional and personal. Like, for instance, I could go back 15 years from now to my younger self, tell the younger self the same thing, and he would have still made the same mistakes. Because he just didn't have that set of experiences to guide him forward.
Right. Well, you had mentioned that your family had many entrepreneurial experiences, and that was part of the inspiration for you. That doesn't necessarily lead into a career with in finance in particular, which is a particular skill within certainly the industry of real estate. But it's a particularly, from my perspective, a particularly arduous aspect of the business. So how did you actually decide to end up in that field and actually specializing in finance as opposed to any other aspect of entrepreneurship?
Well, Alan, as my parents would tell you, I always knew how to run my mouth. So, BSing on the marketing side wasn't the hardest thing in the world.
Right.
But I also realized, look, this is the kind of person I am. I'm more maybe numerate or numbers, sort of, like that's how I process information. So when I went to college, I kind of had an idea from day one that, look, I'm not going to become the next Richard Feynman or Albert Einstein. That's definitely not going to happen. And I realized that pretty early in my life. So basically, my skill set, the option set kept dwindling because I had to decide what I wanted to do. And my parents were very encouraging and supportive, but I wasn't, I'd like to be creative, but I wasn't going to be that creative. And I wasn't going to be creative in a professional setting, right? Because it requires a level of commitment that I frankly didn't have. And I obviously was not going to become the next Mark Twain because that wasn't going to happen. So basically my option set was limited because I had limited to myself because I knew what my weaknesses and strengths were. And I always felt being, somewhat educated in accounting and finance, while as it's arduous, but that's the ticket you buy to get into that club. So it's a bit like that Groucho Marx saying that I don't care to belong to any club that will accept me. So, I wanted to be in a club where, for instance, there was a barrier to entry to get in. So that in the future, and something that wasn't a fad, right? Where, you have a big barrier to get in, it's a fad, it's going to go away in like 5 years or 10 years. Because the last thing I wanted to be was 45 and realize I had to do everything again.
Yeah.
So I knew things like accounting, finance, these were things that were always, the fundamentals of these things were always going to be in use in some fashion, in some way or other.
Yeah, in high demand.
In the same way as the fundamentals of engineering are always going to be in demand, regardless of where we end up going. Right? So I think that's what it was. And I think I just had a lot of good role models based on my family, our social circle, to look up to who had those specific things. Not just entrepreneurially, but, working in investment banking, management consultancy, like say Morgan Stanley's and McKinsey's and all of that. So I kind of had that exposure to realize, look, it's a comfortable lifestyle. So even if, the whole entrepreneurial thing eventually never works out, it's a very high paying, lucrative career. So it's not the worst thing in the world, right?
Well, that was a lot to figure out for a 17, 18-year-old, even a 20, 25-year-old. Because you had a lot of options and there were a lot of other things in your life that were of interest to you. So how did you narrow that down? Were there people in your life that were helping?
Alan, my interests don't really pay me. And my interests don't really put food on the table.
Your what?
So my interest didn't really put food on the table. So just because I listened to music at obnoxiously high levels doesn't mean I was going to pay my mortgage listening to music.
Yeah.
Let's just be honest, right? I love music. I love traveling, but I just wasn't the type of guy, say, for instance, who was going to make a career in music. I think that requires not just a creative bent, but also a level of commitment and a passion that, well, I frankly didn't have 24 hours in the day for.
True, but that took some insight. How did you come to those insights to actually really figure that out?
Well, I led a very comfortable life, Alan, and I was very grateful for that. But what I didn't want to do was spend the first 15 years of my life trying to work up to a level just to make a livable wage, essentially. I'm just going to be honest with you, right? Yeah. I led a very comfortable lifestyle, and I wanted that to continue. And frankly, a lot of creative fields just didn't pay that much. Or for instance, they might pay, but then you're like that one person out of a million.
Right? Yeah.
and the odds are just the odds are just so stacked against you that frankly those were odds that frankly I knew those odds weren't going to apply to me anytime soon.
Okay.
I might as well go and buy a lottery ticket.
Well, it was a lot to figure out, and a lot of
but I think when you kind of have an idea, I think in my case I had an idea what kind of lifestyle I wanted, and that kind of narrowed my option set down. Right.
Well, I'm glad you figured that out.
I can tell you, I'm really glad I figured that out too. I am extremely happy I figured that out.
So, what in your life do you feel most grateful?
Well, look, I feel most grateful for my family, for my kids. They're both healthy. The kid that was just born was born a healthy kid. My wife is a physician, so I only hear horror stories about like people dying and all that kind of stuff. Because and she's a pediatrician on top of that, right?
Oh wow!
So healthy kids don't really go to the hospital. It's mostly sick kids who go to the hospital and have bad experiences. So, just being grateful that my son was born healthy. And look, my parents are alive and kicking. Thank God, her parents are alive and kicking. They're extremely supportive and understanding. So, having that family support structure there as well, having a very good partner. There's lots of things, right? I complain from time to time. Don't get me wrong. I bitch a lot, but there's lots of things to be grateful for. That, frankly, now as I'm growing older, as I've had kids, I meet more people, and I hear their life experiences. I realize, wow, I had a very fortunate life growing up. Even people who are seemingly way ahead of me, they don't have maybe the family structure in place or a good partner, or their kids are kind of weird, right? So I'm really happy about that.
Well, good. Well, just why don't you tell us 3 good things that have happened in the last 24 hours?
Oh, 3 good. That's kind of hard because my kid was having a temper tantrum like the entire 24 hours. 3 good things that I've heard in the 20. Look, my mom's here helping us out. So sometimes, now that I'm not living under a roof, we butt heads all the time, right? So we didn't butt heads as much yesterday or in the last 24 hours. I'm extremely grateful for that. My kid was crying, but I bought him some new books and we read it. So he was really happy with that. And there's a little kid book called Pout Fish. I'm not going to bore you to death with that. So we read that. He was really happy. And now he's learned the nursery rhyme in his head. And we can just go and kind of say that little thing. And, my wife seems like she's kind of less pissed off at me today. Less. Not. Let's be very clear.
Not
totally, there are 3 big things, yeah. And plus, I talked to a potential business partner today. So hopefully, I've convinced him enough to join. And if he comes in, that should be something really nice.
Oh, good. Well, recent studies in positive psychology have shown us that just, taking a moment to reflect on 3 good things each and every day makes a huge difference in our 100% psychology. So,
I don't do enough of it as much as I should.
Yeah.
But I'm 100% in agreement of being grateful and having gratitude.
So what do you find is what is it that you had sort of mentioned this, you like music and other things like that, but what is it that you do in your life that you just do because you want to do it, nobody tells you to do it, and it's just what you're going to do no matter what?
Well, I just love to read books, and not just books on a certain topic, not like, hey, business books or this book or personal development books, or novels. I just like the aspect of reading. My friends would make fun of me when I was in Toronto going to college that we'd get in the subway and we'd want to go somewhere else. And I would just pick up whatever newspaper was on one of those seats and just start perusing. Honestly, none of this is stuff that, for instance, is going to change my mind, improve my life. None of that stuff. I just like reading. I think, it's a nice way to spend time, right? And you don't bother anybody, which is a nice plus point.
Yeah, it just takes you to a new world and a different place.
And it doesn't even have to be like, I've never really understood people who force themselves to read only serious stuff all the time. Because I love reading about trashy stuff.
Yeah. Well, there's all kinds of things to read.
Oh, yeah. And there's all kinds of people, right? People do so many interesting things,
Yeah. Well, Omar, we're coming to the end of our time here. And I've got one last question for you here. And before we go into that, can you tell our listeners how they can get in touch with you?
Sure. They can go to my website or our website, boardwalkwealth.com. So it's BOARD walkwealth.com. Right on the front page, you'll see a form that says your name, email, and how you find out about us. Fill that, press the button. I don't know what that button's called below it. You'll get an email, verify your email address, you'll be added. You can also email me at Omar, O-M-A-R, at boardwalkwealth.com, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay. Well, great. Well, when you come to the end of your life, what would you like to have as your epitaph?
Oh, I wouldn't want to have anything under my epitaph. I totally wouldn't want to be forgotten. Like, I just want to know that when I'm coming to the end of my life, I know that I had a really, really, really good time, and everybody else around me had a fantastic time. And then, the people after me can worry about what they want to think about me. I don't want anything on my epitaph. I'm not one of those people who wants a mausoleum built for himself.
Well, wonderful. Wonderful way to live your life there.
Yeah, but I just want to have a really good time.
Well, I hope you are. Yeah. And it sounds like you are indeed. So it's been a delight, Omar, and I hope we can have some future conversations in the future here, not too distant future.
Well, I hope so too. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for tuning in to Creekside Chats with successful multifamily real estate investors, brought to you by Steed Talker Capital. Steed Talker Capital works with both new and established investors nationwide, creating opportunities to flourish in all areas of life. As part of our efforts to make the world a better place, Steed Talker Capital contributes to activities and organizations committed to better understand the equine. These endeavors attempt to enhance the human treatment of horses worldwide. Steed Talker Capital, working for a world where all creatures great and small flourish abundantly. For resources to enhance your well-being through multifamily real estate investment, connect with us online at capital.steedtalker.com.